Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real tonight. Faith is not for people who have everything figured out. Faith is for people who are willing to move forward when nothing makes sense. Faith is what you lean on when the numbers don't add up, when the doors are closed, when everybody around you is saying, be realistic, and something inside you keeps whispering, keep going. Faith is not pretending you don't see the problem. Faith is seeing the problem clearly and still believing there is a solution bigger than you. Faith begins where logic ends because logic only deals with what you can measure, explain, and predict. Logic wants proof before it moves. Logic wants guarantees, statistics, and a backup plan. Faith, on the other hand, shows up when all of that runs out. Faith steps in when the math doesn't make sense, when the doctor shrugs, when the bank account says no, when the opportunity looks way bigger than your qualifications. That's the moment faith starts talking, because faith was never meant to compete with logic. It was meant to go where logic cannot go. If everything in your life made sense, you wouldn't need faith. If the road was always clear, if the door was always open, if the answer was always obvious, faith would be unnecessary. Faith exists for the gap between what you see and what you believe is possible. Logic says, you don't have enough. Faith says, but God is more than enough. Logic says, you've failed too many times. Faith says, failure is not final. Logic looks at your past. Faith looks at your potential. There are moments when logic will tell you to quit. It will say you're being foolish, unrealistic, or irresponsible for holding on to a dream that hasn't shown any results yet. Logic will remind you of your age, your background, your resources, and your mistakes. Logic keeps receipts. Faith doesn't deny reality, but it refuses to let reality have the final word. Faith understands that what you see today is not all that exists. Every breakthrough starts with a decision that doesn't make sense to other people. That's why faith often feels lonely. When you move by faith, not everyone will clap for you. Some people will laugh. Some people will doubt you. Some people will advise you to play it safe. Faith asks you to trust a voice that others can't hear. That's uncomfortable because human beings like agreement and validation. Faith doesn't always come with either. Faith also requires surrender. Logic wants control. Logic wants to know how, when, and why. Faith says, I don't know how it will happen, but I trust that it will. That kind of trust is not passive, it's bold. It's waking up every day and showing up even when the results are invisible. It's planting seeds when you don't see rain. It's preparing for blessings before they arrive. A lot of people say they have faith, but they never leave the comfort zone of logic. They believe as long as it feels safe. The moment it feels risky, they step back. Real faith begins when you take the step without seeing the staircase. It begins when you obey without fully understanding. It begins when you move forward with nothing but conviction holding you up. Faith doesn't mean you won't feel doubt. It means you won't let doubt drive. Faith doesn't mean the path will be smooth. It means you'll keep walking when it's rough. Logic would have told many successful people to stop early, settle, or accept less. Faith whispered, try again, and that whisper changed everything. When logic reaches its limit, it hands the situation over to faith. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Faith is not ignoring facts, it's believing that facts can change. Faith is trusting that what looks impossible in human terms is still possible in divine timing. Fear shrinks when faith grows because fear feeds on uncertainty and faith feeds on trust. Fear lives in the question, what if it doesn't work? While faith lives in the question, what if it does? Every time you choose faith, you starve fear just a little more. Fear doesn't disappear overnight, but it loses its grip when it realizes it no longer controls your decisions. Fear's favorite weapon is imagination. It shows you worst-case scenarios, public embarrassment, rejection, and failure before you've even tried. It replays past mistakes and convinces you they will happen again. Faith uses imagination too, but in a different way. Faith allows you to picture growth, healing, success, and purpose beyond your current situation. What you consistently imagine is what you move toward, and faith redirects your vision away from fear's limits. Most people think fear means they should stop. In reality, fear often means you are standing at the edge of something meaningful. Fear shows up when comfort is about to be replaced by change. Faith doesn't deny that fear exists. It simply refuses to let fear make the final call. Faith says, yes, I'm scared, but I'm going anyway. That decision alone weakens fear's power. When faith grows, it changes how you interpret obstacles. Fear sees obstacles as warnings to turn back. Faith sees them as tests of commitment. Fear says, this is too hard. Faith says, this is shaping me. Fear magnifies the problem. Faith magnifies the promise. The problem doesn't always get smaller, but your confidence gets stronger, and that changes everything. Fear thrives on isolation. It gets louder when you're alone with your thoughts, replaying doubts in your head. Faith connects you to something bigger than yourself. It reminds you that you're not walking alone, that there is guidance beyond your own strength. When you believe that help exists beyond what you can see, fear loses its authority. Growing faith also changes how you handle failure. Fear treats failure as proof that you were never meant to try. Faith treats failure as part of the process. Fear says, don't risk it again. Faith says, you learned something. Use it. Each time you stand back up, fear shrinks because it realizes it can't stop you anymore. Fear wants certainty before action. Faith produces certainty through action. The more you move, the more confident you become. Confidence doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing. Faith grows every time you step forward despite fear, and fear weakens every time it fails to stop you. A life led by fear is small, careful, and full of regret. A life led by faith is bold, imperfect, and full of growth. Faith doesn't promise safety, it promises purpose. When purpose becomes stronger than fear, fear no longer dominates your choices. As faith grows, fear is forced to adjust its volume. It may still whisper, but it no longer shouts. It no longer paralyzes. Faith reminds you that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to trust something greater than fear. And with every step of trust, fear shrinks just a little more. Your background does not cancel your destiny, no matter how convincing your past tries to be. Where you come from may explain some things about you, but it does not define where you are going. Too many people allow their history to handcuff their future. They look at their upbringing, their financial situation, their education, or their mistakes and decide that success is for other people. Faith challenges that lie. Faith reminds you that destiny is not issued based on privilege, perfection, or popularity. A lot of people were born into environments that taught them how to survive, not how to dream. They learned limitation before they learned possibility. They were surrounded by examples of what didn't work, what went wrong, and what never changed. When that becomes your normal, it's easy to believe that life has already chosen your ceiling. But destiny doesn't come from your environment, it comes from purpose. And purpose doesn't need permission from your past. Some of the strongest, most impactful people didn't start with advantages, they started with hunger. They started with pressure. They started with odds stacked against them. What looked like a disadvantage became fuel. What looked like a curse became character. Faith allows you to reinterpret your story. It lets you see that what tried to break you was actually building something inside you that comfort never could. Your past will try to remind you of who you used to be. It will replay old failures and old labels. It will say, this is as far as you go, or people like you don't get opportunities like that. Faith responds by saying, I may not have started with much, but I'm not finished yet. Faith understands that growth is not about where you begin, it's about whether you keep going. There will always be people who judge you based on your background. Some will underestimate you. Some will doubt you. Some will silently decide your limits without ever asking your vision. Faith teaches you not to argue with opinions that don't align with your purpose. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to keep believing while you work. Your background may have taught you fear, insecurity, or doubt, but it also taught you resilience. It taught you how to endure. It taught you how to adapt. Faith uses those lessons and redirects them. What once kept you defensive can become discernment. What once made you cautious can become wisdom. Nothing is wasted when faith is involved. Destiny is revealed over time, not all at once. If you judged a book by its first chapter, you'd miss the entire story. Faith invites patience with yourself. You don't have to become everything overnight. You just have to become better than yesterday. Every step forward weakens the hold of your past. When you stop letting your background define you, you start living with authority instead of apology. You stop shrinking your dreams to fit your history. You stop explaining why you can't and start discovering how you can. Faith doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. It turns scars into testimony and struggle into strength. Your origin story is not a life sentence. It's just the opening scene. What matters most is what you choose next, what you believe now, and how faithfully you pursue what was placed inside you. Faith requires action, not just belief, because belief without movement never produces change. You can believe in something deeply and still remain exactly where you are if you never act on it. Faith is not a feeling you sit with, it's a decision you live out. The moment faith becomes real is the moment it shows up in your choices, your habits, and your willingness to move forward even when the outcome is uncertain. A lot of people say they have faith, but what they really have is hope without effort. They're waiting for conditions to be perfect before they try. They're waiting to feel confident before they move. Faith doesn't wait for confidence. Faith creates confidence through action. The first step is rarely comfortable, but it is necessary. Faith asks you to move before you feel ready, because readiness often comes after obedience. Action is the language of faith. If you truly believe something good is possible, your behavior will reflect it. You prepare. You practice. You show up. You apply for the opportunity even if you think you might be rejected. You start the work even if you don't have all the answers. Faith does not require you to know every step. It only requires you to take the next one. Fear often disguises itself as wisdom. It tells you to wait, to be careful, to not rush. Sometimes that advice is valid, but many times it's just fear trying to stay in control. Faith challenges that hesitation. Faith says, move, and I'll meet you there. Action breaks stagnation. The moment you move, things begin to shift, doors begin to open, and clarity begins to form. Faith-driven action also builds discipline. Motivation comes and goes, but faith keeps you consistent. On the days you don't feel inspired, faith still shows up. It still does the work. It still prepares for a future that hasn't arrived yet. Consistency turns belief into momentum, and momentum turns effort into results over time. There will be moments when action feels pointless. You'll work without recognition, prepare without applause, and try without immediate results. Faith doesn't promise instant success, it promises growth. Every small action strengthens your trust, sharpens your skill, and stretches your capacity. What feels insignificant today may be essential tomorrow. Action also reveals what belief alone cannot. When you move, you discover strengths you didn't know you had. You uncover weaknesses you need to work on. Faith doesn't protect you from mistakes, it allows mistakes to teach you. Through action, faith becomes practical, not just spiritual. Many opportunities are missed not because people lack talent, but because they hesitate. They wait for signs while faith is waiting for movement. Faith opens doors, but you still have to walk through them. It won't carry you, it will guide you as you walk. When belief is paired with action, faith becomes powerful. Dreams stop being ideas and start becoming realities. Faith is proven not by what you say you trust, but by what you are willing to do because you trust it. Delays are not denials, even though they often feel the same in the moment. When something you want doesn't happen on your timeline, it's easy to assume it's never going to happen at all. That's the voice of impatience mixed with disappointment. Faith teaches you a different interpretation. Faith says that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. It means there is more going on than you can see right now. Most people mistake waiting for rejection. They pray, they work, they try, and when results don't show up quickly, discouragement sets in. They start questioning their worth, their ability, and even their faith. But timing is not punishment, timing is preparation. There are things you asked for that would overwhelm you if you received them too early. Faith understands that being ready is just as important as being willing. A delay can be protection. Sometimes what you want is real, but the version of it you're aiming for isn't the best one for you yet. Faith allows room for redirection without resentment. It reminds you that a closed door today may be preventing a disaster tomorrow. Just because you don't understand the delay doesn't mean it lacks purpose. Waiting exposes what you truly believe. When everything is moving fast, faith is easy. When progress slows down, faith is tested. Delays reveal whether you trust the process or only the outcome. They force you to confront impatience, entitlement, and comparison. Faith grows strongest in the waiting room because that's where trust is developed without evidence. Delays also build endurance. If everything came quickly, you wouldn't develop the strength to maintain it. You'd enjoy the moment but struggle with the responsibility that comes with it. Faith uses time to stretch you. It builds character, discipline, humility, and perspective. What feels like nothing happening is often something being built inside you. Many people quit during delays not because the dream is wrong, but because the wait is uncomfortable. Faith asks you to stay when quitting would be easier. It asks you to continue preparing even when there's no confirmation yet. Preparation during delay is an act of trust. It says, I believe this is still coming, so I'll stay ready. Delays also teach gratitude. When you finally receive what you've been waiting for, you value it differently. You protect it. You respect it. You don't take it lightly. Faith knows that appreciation is often born through anticipation. The wait changes how you receive the blessing. It's important to remember that progress is not always visible. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean movement isn't happening. Roots grow underground before anything breaks the surface. Faith operates the same way. What's being prepared behind the scenes may take time, but it's aligning pieces you could never arrange on your own. When you stop labeling delays as failure, you regain peace. You stop rushing. You stop forcing. You stop comparing your timeline to someone else's. Faith allows you to breathe in the delay, trusting that what is meant for you will arrive when you are equipped to handle it. Waiting doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means you're being positioned. Faith holds steady in the delay, knowing that timing is part of the promise, not a contradiction of it. Trusting God changes how you handle failure because failure no longer feels like a final verdict on your life or your ability. Without faith, failure feels personal, heavy, and permanent. It convinces you that you are not good enough, not chosen, or not capable. When you trust God, failure becomes information, not condemnation. It becomes something that happened, not something you are. Most people fear failure because they think it exposes them. They believe one mistake can define their entire story. Faith removes that pressure. Trusting God means understanding that your worth is not tied to your performance. You are valuable even when things don't work out. That belief alone changes how you recover. Instead of hiding, you reflect. Instead of quitting, you adjust. Failure often brings shame, and shame tells you to stay silent and still. Faith pushes against that voice. Faith reminds you that growth is messy and progress is uneven. Every meaningful path includes setbacks. When you trust God, you stop asking, why did I fail? And start asking, what am I meant to learn? That shift turns pain into wisdom. Trusting God also changes your patience with yourself. Without faith, people are harsh with their own mistakes. They replay them, criticize themselves, and carry guilt longer than necessary. Faith allows forgiveness to enter the process. You understand that you are still being shaped. You stop expecting perfection from yourself and start allowing development. That grace makes it easier to try again. Failure can either make you bitter or better. Faith influences which direction you go. When you trust God, you believe that even setbacks can be used for good. That doesn't mean you enjoy failure or minimize the disappointment. It means you refuse to believe the setback is meaningless. Faith finds purpose in pain and direction in difficulty. Trusting God also helps you detach failure from fear of the future. One failure does not predict the next attempt. Faith breaks that false connection. You understand that today's loss does not cancel tomorrow's opportunity. With faith, you stop assuming that because it didn't work once, it will never work. You approach the next step with renewed courage instead of hesitation. Failure often reveals areas where growth is needed. Faith gives you the humility to accept that without losing confidence. You can admit weakness without feeling defeated. You can ask for help without feeling ashamed. Trusting God reminds you that strength doesn't come from pretending you have it all together, but from being willing to learn and improve. When you trust God, failure no longer threatens your identity. You don't see yourself as a failure, you see yourself as someone in process. That perspective keeps you moving forward. It keeps hope alive. It allows resilience to replace regret. Failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of the journey toward it. Faith doesn't remove obstacles, but it changes your response to them. Trusting God gives you the confidence to stand back up, the clarity to keep going, and the peace to know that one moment does not define your entire future.